He tried to end our date in 30 seconds, then everything changed. Joe had rehearsed this moment for 3 days. Not the date itself, but the walk to the restaurant. The way she would push open the glass door of the little Italian place on 5th Street. The way she would smile like a woman who wasn't nervous at all. She was 31 years old, she told herself, not 16. She had survived a divorce, a cross-country move, and 2 years of rebuilding her life. Alone in a small apartment above a laundromat in Portland. A blind date was not supposed to be the thing that scared her, but it did. Her coworker Denise had set this up. "He's a good guy," Denise had said, waving her fork around like she was conducting an orchestra. "Works in finance, quiet, a little awkward, but sweet. You'll like him." Joe had agreed, mostly because Denise wouldn't stop asking, and because some small, stubborn part of her still believed that maybe, somewhere out there was a version of her future that didn't involve coming home to an empty apartment and a cat who barely tolerated her. His name was Nathan. She had seen one photo, a blurry picture of him at a lake, squinting into the sun, wearing a gray t-shirt. It hadn't told her much. She imagined someone unremarkable, forgettable, safe. That was fine. Safe sounded good after everything. She arrived 7 minutes early and sat at a corner table, ordering a glass of water she didn't touch. When the door chimed and a tall man in a navy blazer walked in, glancing around the room, she knew instantly it was him. He was better looking than his photo, which normally would have been a good thing, except that the moment his eyes landed on her, something in his face changed. It was subtle, the kind of shift most people wouldn't notice unless they had spent a lifetime learning to read faces the way Joe had. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked down just for a second, to her hands resting on the table, and then back up to her face with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not disgust. Not quite. Something closer to shock, quickly buried. He sat down across from her, and for the first 30 seconds he said almost nothing. He picked up the menu, put it back down, picked it up again. Joe tried to make conversation, asking about his drive over, commenting on the restaurant's decor. But his answers were clipped, distracted. Finally, he set the menu down and looked at her with an expression that made her stomach drop. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't think this is going to work. I should go." Joe felt her face grow hot. 30 seconds. He hadn't even asked her a single real question. He hadn't given her a chance to be more than whatever he had decided she was in that first glance. She wanted to ask why, wanted to demand an explanation. But pride kept her mouth shut. Instead, she nodded stiffly and said, "Okay, sure." He stood fumbling with his wallet, dropping a 20 on the table for a meal neither of them had eaten. And then, as he turned to leave, his sleeve caught the edge of her water glass, sending it crashing to the floor in a spray of ice and glass. The sound cut through the restaurant like a gunshot, and every head turned. Nathan froze, his face going pale. And for the first time, Joe saw something raw flicker across his features, not embarrassment, but something closer to panic. His hand trembled as he bent to pick up the pieces of glass. And that was when Joe noticed it, a faint scar along his wrist, old and silvery, disappearing up into his sleeve. He caught her looking and yanked his sleeve down, his jaw tightening again. "I'm sorry," he muttered. Not to her exactly, but to the room, to the mess, to himself. "I need to go." He left so quickly he nearly walked into a waiter carrying a tray of pasta. Joe sat alone at the table, humiliated, furious, and confused all at once, staring at the $20 bill as if it might explain what had just happened. She almost left it there. She almost let the whole humiliating episode die quietly in that restaurant. Another bad date to complain about with Denise over wine. But something nagged at her, that scar. That flicker of panic that didn't match a man simply repulsed by his date. People who are disgusted don't shake like that. People who are disgusted don't look like they're drowning. She paid for her own untouched water and half-eaten breadsticks and walked out into the cool evening air. And that was when she saw him. Nathan was sitting on the curb half a block away, head in his hands, shoulders curled in on himself like a man trying to disappear. Joe almost kept walking. Every reasonable instinct told her to keep walking, to protect what was left of her dignity. But instead, she found herself crossing the street toward him. "Hey," she said, standing a few feet away. "You okay?" He looked up, startled, his eyes red-rimmed. "You should go," he said. "You don't need this." "Need what?" Joe asked. "A guy who ditched me in 30. seconds and then broke my water glass. On the way out, a short broken laugh escaped him, more pain than humor. I'm sorry about the glass. I don't care about the glass, Joe said, sitting down on the curb beside him, ignoring every instinct that told her this was foolish. I care about what just happened in there. You looked at me like you'd seen a ghost. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Then he said, so quietly she almost missed it, You look like my sister. Joe blinked.
What?
My sister Emily, he said. She passed away 4 years ago. Car accident. And when you walked in tonight, the way you were sitting, the way you tucked your hair behind your ear for a second, I thought I was looking at her. It knocked the wind out of me. I panicked. I know that's insane. I know it's not fair to you. I just couldn't sit there and pretend to have a normal date while my brain kept trying to convince me you were someone you're not. Joe sat in stunned silence. Of all the explanations she had imagined, vanity, cruelty, some superficial judgment about her appearance, and this had never once crossed her mind. She studied his face, the genuine grief etched into it, and felt her anger dissolve into something softer, something aching. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That sounds awful. It's been 4 years, he said, and I still see her everywhere, in strangers on the train, in photos that aren't even her. Tonight was just, it hit harder than usual. Joe thought about her own losses, her marriage, the version of her life she had once been so sure of, and felt an unexpected kinship with this stranger crumbling on a curb beside her. Can I ask about the scar? She said gently, nodding toward his wrist. He flinched then, after a pause, pulled his sleeve back slightly, revealing the faint silver line. After she died, he said, I didn't handle it well. This is from a bad year, a really bad year. I'm better now. Therapy, mostly, but some nights are still hard. Joe didn't say anything for a moment. She simply reached over and placed her hand lightly over his. Not romantic, not performative, just human. Thank you for telling me, she said. Most people wouldn't have. They sat there for a while, the city moving around them, neither in a hurry to fill the silence. Eventually, Nathan let out a long breath and looked at her, something like embarrassment and gratitude mixing on his face. I really am sorry about tonight, he said. You deserved better than a guy having a breakdown before the appetizers even came. Joe smiled, the first real smile of the evening. You deserved better than carrying that alone for 4 years, she said. Maybe we're both a little bit of a mess. He laughed again, this time with less pain in it. Maybe. They ended up walking to a small coffee shop a few blocks away, neither quite ready to say goodnight, both a little surprised at how easy it suddenly felt to talk. Nathan told her about Emily, her terrible taste in music, her habit of texting in all capital letters, the way she used to call him at 2 a.m. just to talk about nothing. Joe told him about her divorce, about the loneliness of her apartment, about the cat that only seemed to love her when it wanted food. They talked for 3 hours, not about romance but about grief, about the strange, quiet work of rebuilding a life after it falls apart. It would be easy to say that Joe and Nathan fell in love that night, that the story ended with a wedding and a happy home and children who never knew the mess their parents had climbed out of. But real life rarely folds itself into such a neat bow. And this story, in its own way, resisted one too. They didn't fall in love. Not in the way either of them or Denise had hoped. But something rarer happened instead. Over the following months they became friends, real friends. The kind who check in on hard days, who show up for each other without expecting anything in return. Nathan eventually asked her to be there when he visited Emily's grave for the first time in over a year, something he hadn't been able to do alone. Joe stood beside him in the cemetery, holding an umbrella against a light rain, saying nothing, simply present. He cried for the first time in front of another person since the funeral, and Joe didn't try to fix it or rush him through it. She just stayed. In turn, Nathan became the person Joe called when the anniversary of her divorce rolled around each year, the one who sat with her on her apartment floor eating cheap takeout, reminding her that starting over wasn't the same as failing. He introduced her to a coworker, a kind, steady man named Marcus, who eventually became the partner Joe had quietly hoped to find all along. Nathan stood at their wedding 2 years later, not as a groomsman exactly, but as something harder to name, the friend whose first 30 seconds with her had been the worst of both their lives. and whose next 3 years had somehow become one of the best friendships either of them had. Joe often thought back to that night, the shattered water glass, the $20 bill left on the table, the stranger crumbling on a curb. She used to tell people it was the worst date of her life. Now she tells a different version. She says it was the night she learned that sometimes the people who seem to reject us in an instant are not rejecting us at all. They are drowning in something we can't see, something that has nothing to do with who we are and everything to do with the ghosts they are still carrying. She says it was the night she stopped walking away from people too quickly, the way she almost did on that sidewalk. She says it taught her that curiosity, even when pride begs you to protect yourself, can sometimes lead you toward the very connection you were afraid you'd never find, even if it isn't the connection you expected. Nathan, for his part, still visits Emily's grave every year, but he no longer goes alone unless he wants to. He got better slowly, the way most real healing happens, not in a single dramatic turn, but in small, steady choices made over time, one of which was letting a stranger sit beside him on a curb, instead of pretending he was fine. And somewhere in Portland, above a laundromat, in an apartment that no longer feels quite so empty, there's a photograph on Joe's shelf. Her and Marcus on their wedding day, and just beside them in the frame, laughing at something just out of view, a man in a navy blazer who once tried to end a date in 30 seconds, and ended up staying in her life for good.